How do, guys? So I've got a story here about a 20-year-old murder case that looks like it may be getting solved soon. Basically, this is to do with the Pakistani Bangladeshi Muslim rape gang scandal, which has been rocking the UK for over a decade now. Now, for people like myself who live in the north of England, this unfortunately is not new news, but to a lot of people, it was a mind-blowing moment when it started getting exposed, and even now, there's a lot of people who are still in denial about just how much of a problem it has been, continues to be, and was the whole time. Um, Now, this here is about an investigation that happened 20 years ago where a young girl under the age of 16 died, and one man went to prison. And he was for injecting her with heroin as well, by the way. She died from heroin overdose after being forcibly injected with it. I believe the man only got 3.5 years. It is a long time since I've learned about this story. I have done a series of videos, which I do actually need to complete, on a recent open inquiry that was redone into this whole fiasco. I'll link below those videos. The failings of Manchester Police, of social services, councils, just NHS, doctors, you name it. Everybody involved in this girl's life, apart from I believe it was either her carers or her parents, failed her at every step. We're talking about the police taking her, picking her up from where she was being raped, absolutely intoxicated and off her face, and just dropping her back off at home and stuff like that. And no investigations being found. These sorts of cases. I don't know if it was with this girl, but the police that we're talking about here, there's times where they've been reported to have seen girls being raped in cars, like girls performing various acts on these Pakistani Bangladeshi men in cars. The police are just having a chat with them and then go, yeah, see you later, whatever your name, Abdullah Mohammed or whatever the names are, and then walking off and leaving them to it. Like it's like something from a bad film where if you saw it and you're like, nah, that never really happened. That's how bad these cases were, and where family members were actually being arrested for racism charges for reporting that the girls were being raped. And some of these girls with themselves were arrested for procuring minors. I'm not even joking. They were trying to charge the girls when the girls were trying to report the crimes to the police themselves. The victims would then get charged effectively with being pimps to shut them up. It's absolutely insane. Now, Manchester Constabulary is one of the police forces at the centre of this whole grooming gang scandal. It pretty much does include every police force in England. I think some in Scotland as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Wales and Northern Ireland have got issues there, but they don't seem to have had the same news yet. But Manchester is one of the really, really big ones in Yorkshire, various Yorkshire constabularies as well. Are really, really bad for this of these cover-ups. Anyway, this report that was done in Greater Manchester seems to have been leading to Manchester Constabulary, by the way. Greater Manchester Constabulary has been in special measures for over a year now as well. So this may actually be to do with that report. Absolutely shocking story. That's a little bit of the background on it. This one from 2004 with this young girl, though, was what sort of kick-started the whole public being woken up to the grooming gang scandal. Before this, any mention of it at all by anybody, especially people from working class backgrounds like myself, instantly you're just a racist and a bigot. Straight away, like this. I mean, you still get it now. Unfortunately, there's some just idiots who just don't want to admit it. But this was, although it did take another 4 years really before it really started getting traction. This was where people started opening their eyes and saying, "Hang on a second, I think there might actually be I think these stories that we keep hearing coming from the underclasses may actually have some validity to them after all." Unfortunately, that was the mindset at the time, and still is by some people. It does seem to be a lower class concern to some people, which is why I think part of the reason why they don't like to entertain it, because they see it as below them and they don't want to be. I think it is snobbery, a lot of it. Anyway, let's get on. So, police carried out a series of. Oh, and by the way, I will link this story below. I may skip through parts of it because it is a long story. So I'll link the story in as well. Do read it yourself and do make your own minds up as well, by the way. But let's carry on anyway. So police carried out a series of dawn raids today, that being Tuesday, and arrested 7 men as part of a new probe into child sexual exploitation nearly 20 years ago. This report as well, by the way, is by the Manchester Evening News Arena. There was other papers have covered it, but with the MEN being the local paper to where this has happened, I thought these would be the best people. Sorry, I didn't read the headline, the tagline either. So the MEN joined GMP, that's Greater Manchester Police, during raids over crimes said to have been committed 20 years ago, with the men arrested on suspicion of sex crimes against a girl under 16. So a child is what that means, a child. So the suspects, aged between 41 and 54, so these blokes would have all been over the age of 20 when they'd have done it, were taken into custody following raids conducted by Greater Manchester Police at 9 addresses in Manchester, Stockport and Wilmslow. For anybody who doesn't know, Stockport and Wilmslow are very, very close to Manchester itself. They were today being questioned on suspicion of offences including rape and causing and inciting a child to engage in sexual activity relating to one girl who was aged under 16 at the time of the alleged crimes. The MEN joined police at one of the raids where a man answered the door from officers at 7 a.m. before being led away to a police van in handcuffs. Inside the ground floor flat, the man's partner sobbed as an officer told the man he was being arrested on suspicion of the rape of a female under the age of 16. The woman could be heard repeatedly asking, "What's going on?" as officers made the arrest. The suspect was compliant as he was led away. Can you imagine that? I mean, just sat at home. I mean, for that woman, she probably doesn't have a clue about this. And suddenly the police are knocking on the door. Like, oh, that's the thing though, isn't it? When it came to the people during the recent riots, the police weren't knocking on doors then, were they? We saw all the videos where police were kicking down doors and taking reciprocating electric saws to doors. And yet here, they're knocking on the door. I mean, this is the problem that people keep seeing happening again and again. Two-tiered system of policing. You know what I mean? It's taken 20 years to get these people arrested anyway. And that guy who I was saying before, who injected the girl to death, 3.5 years for that. Do you think like me or you or anybody else would get 3.5 years for that? You know, this is again what people keep saying about, what we keep seeing from the police and the judiciary. And unfortunately, it's not the ground level officers. This is coming from the hierarchy where they're telling them how to deal with this sort of stuff and how to train them. You know, it beggars belief that even with something as serious as this, the police are just knocking on the door. Would you mind coming with us, mate? Go on, we'll take you away nicely. You know, but if you put a mean tweet online, especially if you're a white person about a minority, oh, police going to kick your door down and everything then, aren't they? And I do feel that part of this really is in response to the whole two-tiered policing thing recently. I do feel that this is why they've got the Manchester Evening News to come along with them with this, because they want to try and make it look like, look, we are doing something about it. We are doing something about it. Honestly, guys, honestly, we don't hate you. We don't. So far, GMP has arrested 64 suspects since it launched Operation Green Jacket in May. That's not a very good name. In May 2019. For anybody who's wondering about the Green Jackets, it probably isn't in relation to that, but there used to be a military infantry unit called the Green Jackets, and they had to disband the name and amalgamate them into the Rifles because, in effect, they committed a very, very serious sex crime in Cyprus. Not all of them. I think there's 4 or 5 soldiers. This is going back, I think it's like 2004 or something like that. Long story short, is they ended up killing this girl after brutally assaulting her. And then they took her up into, I think, the Cypriot Mountains and tried burying her to hide the body. Obviously, all came out and got found. And obviously, the Green Jackets had the... Well, they would, like I say, they were basically stripped of the name and amalgamated into the Rifles to try and get rid of the shame of that serious crime that had been committed. So I do find it quite kind of ironic in a not very good way that they've called this Operation Green Jacket. So this was in May 2019. The op was launched in the wake of a damning report published in 2020. That's what I was talking about before, which highlighted the failings of Operation Augusta. Now, Operation Augusta was the original investigation and operation into the murder and rape of young girls by these sorts of gangs, and it ended up getting shut down because funding was intentionally pulled from it. And I do think that was to try and cover up the severity of the crimes that were, the crimes that were happening at the time. Which was that, by the way, was a police decision. And I think the council, if I remember right, I could be wrong, I do believe it was Oldham Council possibly who pressured the police into pulling the funding as well. There's a lot gone on with that, and I can't remember exactly all of it, so I could be wrong with that. I've got to be very clear there. But I'm almost certain that Oldham Council had something to do with the funding being pulled as well, which was looking into allegations of sexual grooming in South Manchester in 2004 to 2005 before it was suddenly discontinued because of resources. It was a decision made by the police. It wasn't just because of resources. They chose to allocate resources elsewhere. That was a conscious decision made by hierarchy. Augusta was launched in response to the death of Victoria Agoglia, who had been subjected to severe abuse and exploitation for 2 years before she died. I mean, that is the understatement of the century. I mean, it wasn't just severe abuse; it was medieval barbarism what happened to that young girl, and the ways that she was let down. It just beggars belief. That young girl lived hell in the last couple of years of her life, and it is disgusting. That and nobody from any official organisation has been sent to prison, by the way, or tried for what they've done to her. You know, it is disgusting the treatment that young girl got. And I do genuinely believe that those people should be facing the death penalty for dereliction of duty for what they did to that young girl. You know, it's shocking. You know, the people who let her down and allowed those men to keep raping her and drugging her and pimping her out and trafficking her around the country, they should be facing the death penalty for what they did. It is beyond acceptable. You know, it's monstrous. I can't think of anything else. Like I'm getting lost for words of how to articulate just how bad it was what they did to her. She died in 2003, but prior to her death, she disclosed to social workers that she was being forcibly injected with drugs and raped, but no effective action was being taken to protect her. It identified up to 97 suspected offenders and at least 57 potential victims, but a review commissioned by Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham in 2017 discovered it was discontinued in July 2005 due to resources. Well, that's, as I say, it wasn't just because of a lack of resources, it's because resources were taken away from it and allocated elsewhere. In March, and that was, as I say, that was a conscious decision by the police, and I believe it was to cover up the extent of the crimes being committed by these gangs because they didn't want to be viewed as being racist. And I do believe that that is correct in what I'm saying. In March, the High Court quashed the verdict of the original inquest into Victoria's death, and a new inquest was set to be held. For people who don't understand what that means, it means because the original verdict was basically a whitewash of what happened, and they were trying to bury the shame of it and trying to hide it rather than being honest and truthful, probably because they were concerned about their jobs and their own freedom. The High Court have actually re-looked at that and gone, no, this is an absolute shambles, this previous verdict. We're basically striking that from the record, that in effect that no longer exists anymore. That original inquest never happened. We're going to do a new one, and it's going to be thorough, and it's going to be proper, and we're going to actually find out what really happened, is basically what that judge is saying there, which is a good thing. You know, we've got to celebrate that, you know. I mean, for as bad and as sad as this is, and all the terrible failings by all these organisations, at least the High Court have done something right here, you know. So fair play to them judges, because I've been very critical of the courts quite recently, you know, saying why do they keep working against the British people? But the High Court itself seems to at least not be captured yet by ideology anyway. After this morning's raid, Detective Inspector Eleanor Humphreys, Deputy Senior Investigating Officer for Operation Green Jacket, said, "Today's actions is just the latest part of our wide-ranging investigation into the shocking abuse that young children were being subjected to in South Manchester in the early 2000s. There is a lady as well who runs a charity. I can't remember the name of it, but she's called Maggie Oliver. I'll link her Twitter in below. She used to work for Greater Manchester Police as well, and she actually resigned from the police because of them covering up these types of crimes, and she's been very pivotal in exposing these crimes. And I believe it might have actually been to do, I think it might have been, she might have even been working with this girl's case, or it was somewhat around these investigations, these specific ones, and she was trying to highlight it and talk about it, and she kept getting told to basically shut your mouth. If you know what's good for your career, shut your mouth. Or words, that's the words to the effect of. Despite the passage of time, so she, like I say, she handed her uniform back in and basically became a whistleblower. So despite the passage of time, this investigation will not go away until offenders are held responsible for their appalling actions. We are clear when we say that in Greater Manchester, time is no barrier to justice. Good. It absolutely should be. And as I say, and I know I keep saying this, and I really, really do mean it, death penalty needs bringing back for this sort of stuff. It absolutely does, and not just for these men who've committed these crimes, for those people who abandoned that young girl and left her to those perverts. Those people need to face the death penalty as well. It's just disgusting what's happened. The whole thing is disgusting. Our extensive work alongside partners will continue. We're doing everything in our power to support survivors and work at a pace they are comfortable with, to listen to them and to ensure suspects are identified, traced and brought into custody. 3 weeks ago, GMP announced one man had been charged in connection with the investigation. Well, that's excellent. At least one person has finally been charged with this after 20 years. But you know what? at least it's something happening now. You know, better late than never, I guess. An inquest into Victoria Agoglia's death in 2007, coroner Simon Nelson concluded that the authorities could not have foreseen her death. Well, I'm telling you now, before we go any further with this, that's a load of BS. That they absolutely could have seen this happening. And this is what I was saying, this is the original investigation where it was people trying to cover up for each other. And that's all it was. It was the original verdict. It was just a massive, massive cover up by the entire institutions, all protecting each other because they didn't want to be seen as racist. And that's all it came down to. They were scared of being called some sort of bigot or phobe or something like that. But the review, later commissioned by Mr. Burnham in 2017 and published in 2020, found that social services failed to protect her. I mean, they didn't just fail to protect her. Failure to protect her makes it, you could misinterpret that and say, well, they tried to protect her. No, they abandoned her. They absolutely abandoned that young girl and left her in the hands of those disgusting predators. The damning 2020 report said the coroner's narrative verdict recorded her inquest significantly underplays the coercion and control she was subject to in terms of child sexual exploitation. Absolutely correct. It also suggested the content of the report following information gathered as part of the review could represent new evidence. If good, I hope they do use it as new evidence, and I hope they throw the book of people who abandoned that young girl as well. They really, really do need to start dragging people in. I don't care if they've retired either. They need to start putting these so-called experts and professionals in the dock, and they need to start charging them. Start with dereliction of duty, really, and work from there, I guess. It found Victoria was threatened, assaulted, and by the way, if you have to change laws and make it so those laws can actually be done posthumously before those laws were brought in, I know they're not supposed to do that. I actually don't care because these are so serious. This is such a gross failure. I would actually be willing to allow that to happen. Why not? Because you know what? They changed the rules for lockdown. They changed the rules to try and stop Brexit. So why not change the rules for this as well? Let's just change the rules. You know, they've done it before. Let's do it now. If Victoria was it found Victoria was threatened, assaulted, and taken back to a residential unit intoxicated. Yeah, usually by the police as well, by the way. The report, the police were also at times walking into houses and finding these men in bed with the young girls and stuff like that. Like, honestly, you can't make this stuff up. It's so insane. Like, you think, oh, if the police walked in and they found a man with his pants down with an underage girl, they'd come on spot. No. Not if they've got brown skin and they've got a name like Mohammed or Abdul, they don't. No, then they just go, oh, sorry, pal. Yeah, we'll tell us when you finish and we'll take her home for you. I like a taxi service. That is not an exaggeration, by the way. I wish it was. That is literally what has happened in the past with these sorts of crimes. It's insane. The report also looked into details relating to a number of other victims and found that most had been failed by police and children's services. Not just police and children's services, also by social services, children's services, also by NHS, by schools, by doctors, by you name it, they've been failed by them. Anybody who's had contact with these girls has failed them. Everybody, even local councillors have known about this. I'm trying to remember his name. I can't remember his name. I follow him on Twitter as well. There's a guy who Oldham Council have tried to take to court and Manchester Police about 3 times to try and shut him up because he keeps talking about these sorts of crimes and the failures. And he's walked out of court every single time that they've tried. And they've tried to send him to prison. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I'll link him below as well because, again, even like I say, even Oldham Council have been involved in this sort of stuff. You know, it's possibly this could go all the way up to Gordon Brown and Tony Blair. Like, they may very well have known about these crimes happening. And Keir Starmer, he may very well have known about these crimes as well. This is how prevalent and known throughout the institutions these things were. It's beyond unbelievable just how much the entire British establishment was involved in trying to cover these crimes up for the sake of diversity and multiculturalism. Multiculturalism at all costs. That is what these people are. They will literally, and this is no exaggeration, these people will sacrifice your children on the altar of diversity. They don't care if people are pumping your children's veins full of heroin themselves and causing your kids to have an overdose. They will sweep the evidence under the rug and they'll arrest you as a racist. That is no exaggeration. It has happened. So the report also looked into details relating to a number of other victims and found that most had been failed by police and children's services, going as far as to say that the authorities knew that many were being subjected to abuse and exploitation but did not protect them from perpetrators. By the way, I know it's gone to 20 minutes, but this story's so important. I am going to carry on with this. Normally I'd end it now, but this is really crazy stuff, this. So Joanna Goglia's, Victoria's grandmother, broke down in tears as she revealed how her teenager was regularly beaten and left bruised by her abusers at a press conference in 2020. Again, you cannot understand. And the family, I don't know if this family were, they may very well have been, but families of these girls were threatened with and often arrested when they went to report this to the police as well. So please don't forget that aspect of this. So these families have done everything, because people often say, well, why weren't the families reporting it to the police, or why weren't they going out and dealing with it themselves? Because anything these people did to try and protect their children, the police would threaten them with arrest, and if they tried to protect the girls from the men, social services would get involved and threaten the families with taking the girls away. So it was a case of, let your kids get raped, or we're taking your kids away from you, and then whoever else has got them will let them get raped. I'm not even making that up. I know that sounds twisted, and that sounds like something from the worst possible cheap horror film, like criminal thriller. And you think that is unbelievable. But that is what was actually happening to these children. It is shocking. The failings identified, promoted another investigation into grooming gangs in Greater Manchester, known as Operation Green Jacket, which is ongoing, and today's raids were part of. Following the morning raids, Councillor Julie Reid, Executive Member for Children's Services for Manchester City Council, said, "We welcome these arrests and progress in this important and complicated operation. We share GMP's determination to see the perpetrators of these awful crimes brought to justice. The Council has actively supported this operation through staffing and other resources since it began. Operation Green Jacket exemplifies how effectively Greater Manchester Police, the Council and other partners are now working together to tackle child sexual exploitation and support those affected by it." Well, unfortunately, it is too late for that young lady, for young Julia, and all the other girls who have been raped over many, many decades. And these crimes are suspected to go back as far as 40 years or even more. This could be 1980s and before that, But at least something's happening here. It is just, we must celebrate small victories. But I tell you something, this is only the start. I am going to leave it at that. Obviously, we're going over the 20-minute mark. Very important stuff. There is a lot of information to take in here. It's really, really saddening stuff that this has been allowed to happen. But we must never, ever give up this and never, ever stop talking about these kinds of things. And we must keep putting pressure on people. And really, I personally, again, I'm still waiting for the petition site to open for Parliament. I will be putting petitions in to bring back the death penalty. And we also must also keep pushing for deportations of these people as well. Because what do we need these people in our country for? We don't. These sorts of people who are committing these crimes, why do we need them in our country? If we can't hang them, then we can at least deport them. They shouldn't be in this country. Anyway, if you found that interesting, useful, insightful, any of that sort of good stuff, please do like, subscribe. Whether you agree with me or not, please do put comments below if you've got something to say. I love reading what people say. I'm not a closed book in my opinions. I am happy to change my mind on things if your points are strong enough. And I also love having a debate with people as well. It's because you can always learn something, which is always great. But anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you for your time. Take care and goodbye.